Hey, this is Jamie from Stonemeyer Games on December 30th. This week is throwing me off as to exactly which day it is and which date it is. Yeah, thanks for joining me today if you are joining me today or joining me in the future on YouTube where I post these videos. I missed last week because I was in Chicago with my girlfriend and her family, just a small bubble of people, just trying to enjoy the holidays and stay safe while doing so. But we had a really nice trip up there, and I hope you had a wonderful holiday week as well, and possibly, hopefully, you're still enjoying the holidays as we get closer to New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. We in Chicago, we spent a little bit of time outside, but it's very cold in Chicago. So we took a nice long walk on a windy day, and we also played disc golf at the Fairfield course in Chicago on a less windy day, bright, clear, still pretty cold, and had a great time there. Looks like George is joining us. Hi, George. So we had a good time being outside there in Chicago, and we also spent plenty of nice time inside, playing games, eating good food, and just spending time with one another. We played Mysterium Park, Mental Blocks, played Tidal Blades again. I was really itching to play that again with a full player count of four players. Played Quacks of Quedlinburg, and we played Mary Poses. This is the first time I'd played the fully published version of Elizabeth Hargrave's new game with AEG, Mary Poses, a butterfly migration game, which we all had a lot of fun with. I have a video coming out about that soon. Good morning, Sean, Tim, Diana, and Paul. Oh, and Diana is mentioning one of the topics I wanted to mention today, which was that I did a video this past weekend about if you love Wingspan, or if you know someone who likes Wingspan, here are 10 other games that I would recommend. And I kind of used a variety of categories there. I looked at theme, I looked at mechanisms, I looked at the feel of Wingspan, the engine building element, the progression in Wingspan. And so there's a video this week or a couple days ago about games that you might enjoy. If you know you like Wingspan, some other games that you might check out, and I think you have a good chance of enjoying them as well. So I think that's what Diana is referring to. Paul mentioned that Wingspan just kicked his butt. Paul, I'm not sure if you played the tabletop version or the digital version, but the Nintendo Switch version of a Wingspan from Monster Couch, developer Monster Couch, did come out just yesterday. So I'm curious if anyone has played it on the Switch yet. I don't have a Switch, so I haven't played that yet. Carlos says that he recently played the Prelude expansion of Terraforming Mars, which uses a concept that Race for the Galaxy also uses, where you have a starting hand of cards that comes from a subset of selected cards. He says, given that each expansion of Wingspan is going to add more cards, I guess that having a set of starter birds and making your initial five cards come from that set might ensure players have a smooth start. Do you think Wingspan would benefit from something like that? Carla, that's a really neat idea. I hadn't thought about that. I don't know if Elizabeth has thought about that, but it's an interesting idea to have maybe even a part of a set designed around that idea that these are the starting cards, the starting birds that you maybe shuffle up and deal them around to various birds, to various players, and then you launch into the full game. That might be something interesting to explore. The only tough part there is that it would need to be compatible, most importantly with the core game, but also with all of the other expansions. So which are kind of a work in progress because Elizabeth has only designed two expansions so far. So I love that idea, and I'll bring that up with Elizabeth. And we just gotta figure out how to maybe if we do determine we should do something like that, which I don't know if it's completely necessary because I think part of the fun of Wingspan is starting with five bird cards and deciding which of those are important for you to keep and not keeping the other ones. I think that's a really important and fun decision in Wingspan. But I like the idea and I appreciate you sharing it. Vito. Keith is asking already for the chocolate of the day. I do have this prepared. One of the holiday gifts I got from a distributor was a box of milk chocolate macadamia nuts from Hawaiian Host. These are big, chunky things. I'll show them to you. They are big and delicious, and I do intend to have probably more than one today because they are really, really good. Here's what they look like. I also got some very nice specialty chocolate that I'll show off in future weeks unless I've eaten it, but I'll try to save the box to show it off on those weeks. Tim said that he played plenty of games over the holiday week, including Between Two Cities and Scythe. Nice, Tim. Yeah, I'm glad you got some Stonemaier games in over the holidays. Steven says he's letting me know that Scythe is in the Board Games Barbecue podcast bracket grand finale or grand final. That's awesome, Steven. Steven is from a podcast called the Board Game Barbecue Podcast, and I had the chance to speak with this podcast earlier this year. And that actually reminds me, I did have a nice podcast chat with Randy at Legendary Tactics a few days ago. We had a wonderful chat. I don't think it's live on YouTube yet, but feel free to check out the Legendary Tactics YouTube channel or the Board Game Barbecue podcast, which I'm definitely already on earlier this year. Day says, can I say something about the Wingspan Big Box? I can't wait. Yeah, so the Big Box, sometimes when I work on products, they're kind of a surprise. I might hint at them and then I just reveal them after we've made them. We're doing something a little bit different with the Wingspan Big Box because I definitely want feedback from people along the way. So what we've been working on so far is I've been working with someone at Panda, our manufacturer, to essentially design the first iteration of the box. And they are going to send me a bare bones version of this box, a prototype, sometime in the next month. And when I get that, I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to share photos, maybe a video on the Wingspan Facebook group so we can all talk about it and make sure that we are creating the best big box experience to serve Wingspan fans everywhere. So just stay tuned in the Wingspan Facebook group, and sometime probably in late January, I will have an early prototype of this big box to share with you. And just to clarify for anyone who's hearing about this big box for the first time, it is simply a big empty box with an organizer inside of it. And probably a little bit more than, we're going to have some special things inside the box, but nothing gameplay related. This is not what you normally think of when you hear a big box. In fact, I should probably just start to call it a legendary box because that is akin to what we do with Scythe's legendary box, where it's just a box and an organizer, no gameplay content in the box itself. Yeah. Let's see. Vito says, did I enjoy Quacks? He says, I got it for Christmas and I'm hoping to get it to the table soon. I love Quacks. Yeah, I've been playing Quacks for a couple of years now. This was just one of many plays of Quacks, and I really, really do love it. This was just with a core game, and I found that there were a few things in the expansion that I did miss a little bit while playing with just the core game, but I really love Quacks. It's up there among my favorite deck builder bag builders. Yeah, wonderful game. And I hope you enjoy it. Corey says that he just got Wingspan and he played it with his wife and mother-in-law, neither of which are big into board gaming. And he said that they all loved it and the mother-in-law is itching to play it again. Well, that's wonderful. You must be a good teacher if they enjoyed that first play so much. But hopefully Wingspan does provide that good first play experience. Joshua says he picked up the Switch version of Wingspan last night and the music, sound effects, and bird information is awesome. Fantastic production. I'm really glad to hear that, Joshua. Yeah, thank you for chiming in about that. As I mentioned earlier, the Switch version of Wingspan was released by Monster Couch just yesterday. So I did my video this last week on games if you like Wingspan, other games you might like if you like Wingspan, and then I did my blog on Monday about being a better client. I had an interesting conversation during the holiday week with a friend about a client who maybe it wasn't necessarily putting themselves in the shoes of the company they were asking to do something for them. There's a greater example or longer example in the blog post itself. But it made me think like, sometimes I am not a great client. I maybe ask my manufacturer or I approve something from my manufacturer, and then a few days later I'm like, I'm second guessing this. I wish we could change this. And when I do that, I generally realize that I'm inconveniencing them. I've already approved it. I'm now going back on something I said, and I'm making their job a little harder by doing that. And so when I make a request like that, A, I try not to make those requests if I can avoid it. And B, if I do make a request, I try to be apologetic. I try to show them that I understand that I'm inconveniencing them. I kind of have a couple different things that I say there, and I genuinely mean them. I don't like to inconvenience someone, even as a client. I want to have a good relationship, a good partnership with the companies I work with. And so it was a post about that sometimes the best, I think, business relationships are partnerships. They feel like partnerships. They feel like relationships. They go both ways. They're mutually respectful. And I think sometimes as a customer and a client, I forget that. I think sometimes as a business owner, I forget that too. And then this post was a good reminder for me to remember that. Ari says hi. Beth says that she also loves Quacks of Quedlinburg. Let's see. Diana says that her recent Wingspan game gave her 5 starter cards with no forest cards. Ooh, that's rough. That's rough. So I guess that would be one way to somehow build a starter set where a lot of the birds are fairly diverse so that you can play them so you can get a bird in the forest right away. But I don't necessarily know if you need a forest right off the bat at the beginning of the game, a forest bird. But it can help. Allison is joining us from the Kidsplaining crew, wishing us a Happy New Year. Chad says he played his first full game of Pendulum last night and really enjoyed it. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome, Chad. Pendulum was our only new game released in 2020, and I'm going to be highlighting some of the different things that happened at Stonemaier Games in tomorrow's blog post, kind of a year in review, looking at each month, the big things that happened in that month, whether it's new releases, because we did have a few expansions that were released, whether it's big things in the world that happened that impacted our company, like the pandemic, of course, has had a huge impact on the industry, the gaming community, and Stonemaier Games, things like that. I'll talk about that tomorrow. So I'm curious if you have any highlights of 2020 that you can think back when you look back at 2020 that you'll think, oh, this is the thing, this is the most memorable moment, in a good or a bad way. Hopefully there were some good moments this year, even though it's been a tough year. While I'm talking, I want to make a note about that post because I just thought of something I want to mention as part of it. Yeah, there we go. What else am I talking about today? I am also, so I had planned to play The Lost Ruins of Arnak a couple weekends ago. I was super excited to play it. That was kind of the last game of 2020 that I really, really wanted to play, and I wasn't able to play it. But I am playing it tomorrow. So I'm really looking forward to playing that. And then after that, I will make my list of my top 10 games of 2020. I'm really looking forward to making this list. It's actually a fairly long, the list I have right now is fairly long. It's going to be tough to whittle it down to the top 10. But and I'm curious if Arnak will make it or not. I'm really excited to play it. And I'm curious if you've played The Lost Ruins of Arnak, if you enjoyed your experience with it. Terrence says he would love a version of Wingspan to play with his daughter. Are there any future plans for a kid version of Wingspan? There are no plans right now, Terrence. I think the big thing with Wingspan is a lot of the fun of Wingspan comes from those unique abilities on the bird cards. And Wingspan is fairly accessible except for the language dependence, but I think that is a fairly integral part of the game. So you're right, because of the amount of text on the cards, it isn't particularly kid friendly. However, there's also really no hidden information in Wingspan. And so you could play side by side with your daughter, and just if she isn't of the age that she can read the cards yet, she can still help pick the cards. She could ask you questions about the cards for the text that she can't read. A lot of it is still icons. And you can just, when she needs to activate a row of bird abilities, you can just read the cards for her and help her along with that. So because of that, I don't think we're planning to make a family or a kid's version of Wingspan, but I think it is currently pretty family friendly. But I'm open to your feedback about that, Taryn. If there's an impediment to you playing with your daughter, I'd love to hear about it so we can think about that. Steven says that he's really enjoying the Oceania expansion. And Steven is also back from down in Australia, so I'm glad to hear that we did something good for your region, or made your region proud based on the birds that we put that Elizabeth selected for Oceania. Louis says, any deadline for Wingspan's second expansion in French? Yeah, that's totally up to Madigo, our French partner, for them to reveal. I do have some information about that, but that's their information to reveal and share. And I don't think it'll be long, but that's definitely up for them to share. So feel free to ask Madigo if they want to share anything about that at this point. David says, how is 2021 looking like for Stonemaier Games? Yeah, we kind of share vague information about this on our progress chart. It's on the news section of our e-newsletter and our website. And I'm really excited about what's coming up in 2021. We have one product that is not a surprise at all. We are making a tabletop version of Rolling Realms, which is a print and play game that I made, started the design back in like March of last year, maybe February, March of last year. So that is definitely coming out. We have some expansions coming out. We have at least one secret game, maybe two secret games, depending on how the schedule for one of them works out. So I'm excited about all of that. I'm also excited to continue our efforts for the Black, Indigenous, and people of color movement that we tried to be really engaged in and purposeful and active in over the last year. And so I'm excited to continue that, and I'm excited to continue these live casts. So a lot of things we're continuing doing from 2020, hopefully with less pandemic. Let's see. Nick says he picked up Wingspan Digital on Steam recently, and he says, it's his first experience with Wingspan, and he's enjoying it. He says, the only thing I don't like about it is the actions that require or give the option of discarding bird cards. This has been the one where the action has felt painful. These are my birds. How could I just get rid of them? Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, that is tough. Like, it's a tough decision. Which cards are you going to keep in hand? Which cards are you going to discard? I think the one thing to remember there though is Wingspan gives you a lot of bird cards. You get a lot of bird cards in hand if you choose to draw cards. And you really can't play all of them, and you probably don't want to play all of them. They're not all going to fit on your mat. They all don't all fit into your strategy. And so at some certain points, there are birds that you probably just aren't going to play. And so that, to me, whenever I have to discard bird cards, I kind of look for those cards, and I don't feel as bad about getting rid of them. Tim says he was so glad to finally get Scythe, and it's one of his favorites. I also have two of the three expansions. If I wanted to be a completionist, what all should I look out for? His friendly local game store has encounters in the modular board. He just pre-ordered the hardcover book. What else is there? You have the metal coins, the realistic resources, the promos that we sell through MeepleSource, mostly promo cards, some promo coins. And there is also the board extension if you have a giant board game table and want a giant version of Scythe on your table. There are a few other things on our website, but I think that's it. Like if you go to the buy page on our website for Scythe, you can see all the Scythe stuff there. Donna says, I just want to say how awesome dealing with your staff is. She says, I requested a missing piece from our viticulture and we received awesome customer service. Thank you. Well, thanks, Donna. I'm glad to hear that. We try to work with our manufacturer to keep the number of missing pieces or broken pieces very, very low. But when it happens, we are definitely here to serve you. And even if you lose a piece or a piece gets broken, a card gets torn after you played a game dozens of times, we're happy to replace that as well. Joe is in charge of the replacement parts team, and I think he does a wonderful job doing that. We have helpers around the world that help out with that, and Joe specifically is in charge of it in the U.S. And I'm glad you had a good experience with Joe or whoever you worked with to make that happen. Allison says that she is also looking forward to her first play of Pendulum, but hasn't played it yet. Yeah, I hope your boys enjoy that, Allison, and you enjoy your first play. Gerald says, have you ever gotten rid of a game your group didn't like but you really enjoyed? I have a few times. He says I have done that a few times, unfortunately, but I've learned from them first. Yeah, there have definitely been a few games that has been the case with. Games that I would love to get to the table, but no one else in my group really wants to. And this year, actually, that's been some of the case with Megan, because most of my two-player gaming, or almost all of my gaming, in-person gaming, has happened with Megan. So if there's a game that I just know Megan is never going to be excited to play, even as much as I might love that game, one kind of infamous one between us in this case is Dice Throne. I love Dice Throne, but it's one that she just doesn't enjoy, and she would be my primary playing partner with Dice Throne because that's primarily a two-player game. And so I did give it to other friends that I thought might enjoy it. So it does happen from time to time, I think, that there are games that I really enjoy and other people in my group or other people I play with just don't enjoy that game, and I do end up getting rid of it. But like you, I try to learn from it first and just have fun with it if I can. And maybe it'll show up in digital format someday. Chad says, I think he's referring to me saying that I'm going to make a favorite games of 2020 list soon. He says, is that just your favorite games played during the year or your favorite games that were released during the year? Kind of both. I limit the list, these top 10 lists of the certain year. I limit it to games that were widely available for the first time in that year or very close to it. Because there are certainly many games that I played for the first time, like Shards of Infinity is a game that I love. I played that for the first time in 2020, but it was released a couple years ago. And so that will not be eligible for the list, even though it is eligible for my favorite games of all time list that I do twice a year. But I try to limit the 2020 list to games that I played for the first time in 2020 that were also released widely for the first time in 2020. Let's see if I have some other comment. I'm loving the comments and the questions here. Feel free to join in the conversation with any part of what I've been talking about today. I did want to mention one thing. I think, two things. One, obviously today is a Wednesday, but I'm not doing the e-newsletter today. It was kind of I try to do it right at the beginning of any month, but the beginning of the month will end up being January 6th, next Wednesday. I think it's the 6th. So I'll do our monthly e-newsletter next Wednesday. I don't think there's any really big news that I'll be sharing in that e-newsletter, but if you're looking for it today, it'll come out next week. The other thing is I got a really, really nice letter from someone that I wanted to share. Not the whole letter, but earlier this year when we did our April Fool's products, all of the money that we generated from that, and even then some on top of it, we decided to give it to people, to fans of Stonemaier Games, people who had supported Stonemaier Games in the past by purchasing our products. We decided to give it to people who were suddenly facing immediate economic hardship from the pandemic. And so I basically for a period of time, I think it was in February or March, probably March, I invited anyone who was struggling and needed some extra money to make ends meet, who had supported us in the past. I invited them to just fill out a form and request a certain amount of money. I think it was like $100, $200, $300, a certain amount. And I sent them some money. No questions asked, just if they were in need, we tried to help out. And I've gotten a few people who received that money have thanked me for it. Not that was expected. It was nice, but one of them sent me just a really lovely letter, just a letter the other day, thanking me for it. His son drew a photo of a Christmas tree, and it was just a really touching letter to have both a thank you note and his perspective on what this year has given him and his family. He says it has been a tough year because he and his wife have been furloughed from their jobs, but he said the silver lining for them has been that they've had a lot of time to spend together. He says, it's been such a blessing and a gift to spend this much time with their son and his wife, and spend that time together and work on things that maybe they wouldn't have been able to work on without the pandemic. Usually a lot of like home improvement type things, but just a lot of quality time with the family. And it was really, really heartwarming to read that. So I thought just wanted to share that with you. That was just something that really, really touched me recently when I received this note. Yeah. So Josh says, a subscription box I get just canceled all memberships for people from the UK based on Brexit requirements for companies. Will that be affecting Stonemaier at all? He says, this might make a better blog post than live reply. You're right, I probably do need to write a blog post about this. I think there's still some uncertainties about it. But what we are doing is the main shift is duties that we are seeing is that there will be products shipped out of the UK to the rest of Europe that now will require some duties to be paid. And our plan is that we will just pay those duties up front so that from a consumer perspective, it will be the same on either end. This might eventually lead to a slight increase in shipping costs from the UK to Europe, but we're hoping to keep that pretty minimal. But so it is a little odd that a company would just not do it anymore, because essentially any company could pass those costs on to the consumer. But I understand that companies might not want to do that, but I mean, they could just do what we're doing and incur a little bit of extra cost themselves. But maybe if it's a membership service, they have very thin margins, and so maybe they won't be able to do that. Or maybe they just don't want to deal with a hassle, because it is definitely going to be a hassle. Brexit is a huge hassle for anyone who is shipping things out of the UK to Europe. Or vice versa, I imagine. Shadi says, I have all games that Stonemaier Games has released. Wow, awesome. All 10 games. It's a silly question, but if I should focus on one game to play a ton in 2021 to really delve into the strategy of playing with my wife, which would you recommend? Mostly two-player. And I'm guessing you're asking of the Stonemaier Games. I don't know, that's really hard for me to answer, because I want it to be the answer that's best for you and best for your wife. So I would maybe, if you played them all, if you played all those games and your wife has played them all, maybe you could each make a top 3 list of games that you really enjoy, and maybe pick the one on that list that overlaps between the two of you that you've played the least. And you could do a deep dive of that game in 2021. Maybe, that's just a thought. And you don't necessarily have to restrict it to one of those games. Oh, and Shadi is asking this question to anyone who wants to chime in there. Miles says, I think this is harkening back to my discussion about Wingspan as a kids game. Miles says, we play Wingspan with my daughter and just talk her through her options. Obviously, it takes more time, but she loves it. I'm glad to hear that about your daughter, Miles. Is Leona starting to read now, Miles, or is she getting there a little bit? Dan says that he just finished the Nature Preserve campaign for Wingspan and he loved it. I know that's a fan-created expansion, but are there any thoughts of Stonemaier Games developing something similar? I'm completely open to doing a campaign-style expansion for Wingspan. That would be very different than the other expansions. In fact, I'm kind of hoping that Elizabeth decides to do that at some point, but it is entirely up to Elizabeth. She is she's the designer of Wingspan, and so she has complete creative freedom there. But yeah, it would be fun to have one of the expansions be a campaign expansion. It might also be interesting to have an expansion be a cooperative expansion at some point. Therefore, each expansion can feel different, and all of them can still have bird cards that you can just shuffle into the rest of the bird cards and play with those cards, even if you don't want to play a cooperative version of Wingspan or a campaign version of Wingspan. Let's see. Christopher says that he has played. I mentioned that I'm playing Lost Ruins of Arnak tomorrow. I'm really excited about that. And Christopher says it has an interesting thing with combining deck building and worker placement and resource management. No one thing stands ahead of the others, and they blend very well. He says he enjoyed it. Tony says he played the networks for the first time last night. He says, I know that in an older video you were a fan of the decide when to end your round aspect of the game. Was that an eventual influence during the development of Tapestry? Wasn't sure which preceded the other. I'm pretty sure I designed Tapestry after playing the networks, but I hadn't thought about it in that way. But I am working on a list that is related to that topic, and I had forgotten that the networks even does that. So I'm thinking of games like other games on the list are like Clans of Caledonia, where you have a bunch of money at the beginning of the round and you use money to spend on pretty much everything you do. And then at any point you kind of decide you either run out of money and you have to pass, or you decide I've done enough this round. I'm going to save the remaining money I have for the next round and continue on playing. So I am looking. I don't have enough games for a top 10 list for this category yet, but I am looking for more games in that category. And I like that you phrased it as kind of decide when to end your round. I'm going to make a note about that. When to end your round. And Tapestry certainly does fall into that same category. Matthew says he ordered his Wingspan Playmate. I think maybe Playmat, unless you have a special Wingspan Playmate. Playmat. It shipped on the 12th. Still not got it. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, Matthew. That it could be an issue with the courier. It could also be an issue with us. It's tough for me to do customer service live like that for a very specific order, so I'd recommend that you contact at stillmeyergames.com and ask about it. And just list your order number, even maybe list your tracking number if you have it, and we can look into that. Every now and then a package is made at our fulfillment center, and it looks like it is shipped, but really it was never picked up by the courier. But also we know how busy couriers were during the holiday season, so it may have just gotten lost in the shuffle. And if that's the case, we'll send you another one. We're happy to help. Just tough to help you live with that. Steven says he finally got Euphoria, and he's loving it. That's awesome, Steven. He says, I know Game Trays is new to the recent printings. What about the amazing resources? The gold is so cool. Has Euphoria always had these components? In the original retail printing of Euphoria, there was a lot more cardboard than wood. I think certain things were definitely a cardboard instead of wood, like the stars, for example. And there was no Game Trays tray in it. But I think the resources and the commodities were always wood. I think we did change the shape at one point to make them a little easier to pick up, a little easier to differentiate the colors of some of them, because I think the gold at one point was too similar to the color of the lightning. So we changed that a little bit. So we made little tweaks over time to those resources. But I would say at this point you definitely have the best version that we've made of it. Aside from the realistic resources, it is really fun to play Euphoria, especially with our realistic gold blocks that you can now get from Top Shelf Gamer. Ilya is wishing us a Happy New Year. Thank you. Happy New Year to you too. Joe says, who is your favorite character to play in Scythe? I jump around from a few different factions. When I play Scythe, I generally like to choose a faction that I haven't won a lot of times with or haven't won at all. And those, I believe, are Albion and Saxony. I think those are the two that I haven't won with. Sometimes I confuse Albion with Togawa there. It might be Togawa. But yeah, those are, I like the challenge of winning with a faction that I haven't won with before. Joshua says he's still in the process of moving to Ohio from Illinois. He says, I'll be moving my cat for the first time since I rescued him last year. What's the longest trip your cats have taken, and do you have any advice for a 6-hour trip? His cat is a large breed, 19 pounds. That is a big cat. Biddy was around that size before we put him on a diet. I have taken my cats for long car rides. I've taken them every now and then I travel back home to Virginia from St. Louis, and it is approximately a 13-hour car ride. And one thing the cats seem to really like, I mean, they hate the car ride. They don't want to do it. But if I bring them along, in my Camry, I pull down there's kind of a latch that opens up the trunk to the rest of the car. And it allows the cats to come up and, so I let the cats roam free. That's one thing. Not entirely safe, but it helps their experience, I think, of the trip. I like that they can have access to the front of the car by doing that if they want to come up and say hi or sit in the front seat for a while. But it also gives them a safe, dark, enclosed space in the trunk to sit in where they can go back there and they can hang out back there. And it lets me leave the litter box open back there so that they can crawl in the litter box and use it if they need to. The only downside of that is that the litter box becomes a safe place for them during the trip. So sometimes they just go and sit in the litter box for a long period of time, which is a little gross. But it does seem to help their anxiety during the trip. I would also make sure that you have cleaning fluid and paper towels in case one of your cats does get sick in the car. That has happened to me, and you can just clean it up because otherwise your car is going to smell really bad for the whole trip. Good luck with that, Joshua. George says, how was Christmas? We enjoyed some quality time and Stillmeyer games. I'm glad to hear that, George. Thanks for playing some of our games over the holidays. I had a great time up in Chicago with a small bubble of Megan's family. We played a lot of games. We read around the fireplace. We had good times with her brother's dog and her parents, and ate a lot of good food. Yeah, we had a lovely time. Kim says she's a fellow St. Louis resident. She says, one of the things I'm most looking forward to post-pandemic is getting back to Pieces. Oh, yeah. She says, have you been much? We love seeing some of our games there. Yeah, I have been to Pieces a few times, and we always host our design day there, except for this year when we decided to cancel the in-person event. But yeah, I am really excited for Pieces to safely be open again in the future. And I know it's been tough for them to weather this storm. I think they decided a while ago to just stay closed for a while to keep their staff safe, keep everything safe. Anyone who might come in there, keep them safe as well. So yeah, I hope they're doing well, and I hope they come back strong post-pandemic. Gerald says, what do I think from a business owner point of view of world leaders agreeing with the World Economic Forum's reset proposals for the economy and society? They have an ad saying, you'll owe nothing and be happy. They said the pandemic is a great opportunity for lawmakers to make these changes to save the planet from us. Sounds like a topic that I probably need to research a little bit more, Gerald. That I don't know a lot about that specific agreement. I guess in a general sense, the pandemic is an opportunity for us to look at how we treat each other and treat the environment. And it is an opportunity to reset certain things and change the way we do certain things. So I think it's a hard thing to say that the pandemic provides opportunities, but I don't know, any disaster, any tough time in the world or in even in your personal life, I think it is a potential opportunity to have a better future and to learn from the mistakes that we've made in the past. So I hope that's kind of what they're saying there. Carlos says his 2020 was marked with spending more time playing games with his family. He says, we love to spend most of our weekends moving from one game to another. It gives us a great opportunity to share some time together while building great stories. It was also a year when I tried to spread the love for the hobby. Well, that's wonderful, Carlos. I'm so glad to hear that. And it's wonderful that you've tried to share your love for the hobby this year. Donna says that she was just started looking at Dice Throne. We were looking at the Adventures expansion. I haven't played that expansion yet. I really do enjoy the core game because I love push your luck games. But I think that's a key part of it. You have to enjoy the push your luck, and you have to kind of know that sometimes luck isn't going to go your way, and it's up to you to decide whether or not you're still going to have fun when that happens. I do. That's my experience with it. Let's see. Ivan has some feedback about the PC version of Wingspan. He says, it took me a while to realize the egg spaces were on the bottom of the cards. Maybe developers should highlight the colors on the eggs a bit more to make them sparkle a bit with effects. What do I think? I haven't really played any of the digital versions of Wingspan, Ivan, but I think that sounds like pretty good feedback to if that's been your user experience. And I hope you can share that with Monster Couch, the developer of the digital version, so they can consider that for an update or patch. Corlin says, any New Year's resolutions? Release more games each year, maybe? Well, definitely not that. I mean, part of the core principles of Stonemaier Games is to be very intentional and slow about the releases, so that we respect your wallets and your gaming time. So we try to really and to respect the designers who spend so much time working on those games. So we only really want to release 1 or 2 games a year. I think we only did 1 this year, so it is possible that we might do 3 next year, but I doubt it. So we want to stay small and focused. Any New Year's resolutions? I don't know. This has been a very good learning year for me to learn and listen in a number of different ways, different aspects of my life, and so I'm still doing that in all of those aspects and trying to improve that in particular. So I don't know if it's a completely fresh resolution, but it is something that I'm trying to continue on and learn from my some experiences and some mistakes that I made in 2020. Betsy says, it seems very new gamers get overwhelmed with learning rules and any setup that is even slightly fiddly, even with the simplest games. Do you have any thoughts from a game design perspective on how to ease players into a game, much like how you can turn on a video game and just start learning immediately as you play? Betsy, that's a fantastic question. That's something I think about a lot as a designer because I want that onboarding process to be as smooth as possible, not just for new gamers, but also for people who maybe are returning to a game for the first time in a long time. In terms of setup specifically, it's interesting that you focused on this setup. Actually, I do have a video that I just filmed yesterday about when games that ask players to make decisions during the setup process. And I think that can be a little bit of an impediment to the onboarding process. You're asking players to make an informed decision before they even know how the game is played. And so I try to avoid those in our games, or if we do have them, like in Wingspan, it's typically a very simple decision that doesn't ruin anyone's game either way based on that decision. And in Wingspan, there is a very easy guidance to give to players, which is to say, pick a few bird cards and keep the resources, keep the food, keep enough food that you can actually play those birds early in the game. Very easy to instruct players how to do that without needing them to understand what all those different things on the bird cards mean. The other thing, this is a big topic, this is a great topic. One other thing that I'll throw out there for now is whenever I'm writing rule books or teaching games that are in prototype development, I try to keep an eye out for how often I'm saying the word remember or accept. Remember or accept. And if I say those words, it is a reminder to me that the game is asking too much of the players. I'm asking the players to remember something that should be integrated into the interface of the game or that I should remove entirely because I'm asking them to remember something that isn't just out there on the table. And that does really, really hurt. It helps when you do that. It helps the learning and retention process, I think, for games. Those are 2 little things. I'd love to hear your feedback or any other feedback that anyone has in the comments about onboarding new players into games and keeping that experience as streamlined as possible. Let's see. Mark says, does the hardcover side rulebook lay flat when open? No, definitely not. This is why we actually originally went with the spiral bound version because that's the whole point of the spiral bound version, that you can open it flat, you can even flip it over and just have it open on one page if you want. The hardcover version was a version that we made because a lot of people asked us to make it and they wanted like a fancier version of it, even though it does not provide the amount of utility as the spiral bound version in terms of laying flat and being able to fold over. So if you want it to lay flat, definitely go with the spiral bound version. Daniel says, how do I sign up for the newsletter? Go to the Stonemaier Games website, stonemeiergames.com, and click on the news button right at the top of the page, and then you'll see a link right at the top of that page to subscribe to the e-newsletter. I think there might also be, is there another link up here, right at the upper right of the page? There's a little, let's see if that is it. Oh, no, yeah, go to the news section. Carol says, how did I like Lost Ruins of Arnak? As it turns out, I didn't get to play it last week when I thought I was going to, but I am going to get to play it for the first time tomorrow. So I haven't played it yet, but I'm really excited to play it tomorrow. Tim says, I understand the modular board for Scythe can tighten up the map for lower player counts. The 2 times my wife and I played Scythe, we only had 1 combat each game. Maybe we're just nice to each other. Yeah, I mean, originally when I designed Scythe, and I still stand by this, the board allows you to be as interactive as you want with other players. It's very easy to jump across the board and fight another player if that's the style of play that you want. It's also very easy to stay away from other players, even at 3 or 4 players, you can do that. But the modular board, yes, you have the option with the modular board to remove entire sections so that the board itself is a lot tighter. You still have the option to fight or not, but the board will be tighter if you play that way with a modular board. John says he picked up Tapestry for Christmas, and it may be my new favorite game next to Scythe. That's awesome, John. I'm glad you're enjoying Tapestry. Thank you for saying that. Tom says, am I enjoying Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson, the 4th book in the Stormlight Archive? He says he was lucky to get it for Christmas, but have not started it yet. He says his favorite book in the series is The Way of Kings. I go back and forth between my favorite being the first and the second book. I think they both have some huge epic moments. I think the second book is probably my favorite because of those moments. But some of the things that happened in the second book, I think actually happened in the first book and vice versa. But yes, I am 60% through Rhythm of War right now. It's a big book. It's 1,200 pages, I think. And it's taken me some time, but I am really, really enjoying it. And I'm impressed by how deep Sanderson is going into the characters in the book. So if you are looking for a big epic fantasy series, I would highly recommend the Stormlight Archives, which starts with The Way of Kings. Jared says, do I think Tapestry allows for the most complex planning of any other game that you've published, despite it being one of the easiest to learn? There is quite a bit of planning in Tapestry, although I would actually say Viticulture might be that game, because in Tapestry you can plan ahead if you want, and probably you'll play better if you plan ahead. Plan ahead for your turn, your round, your entire game. You can kind of look ahead and say, okay, I want to go far on this track and not far on this other track. But the nice thing about Tapestry is you don't have to do that, and you can still play well if you kind of make decisions one day at a time, one turn at a time. I think Viticulture, on the other hand, while it is also a tactical game, you're responding to the cards that you draw to a certain extent. But in Viticulture, there are many steps of operations that you go through. You get money so you can make structures. You get vine cards so that you can and you make structures so that you can plant vine cards. You have to get the vine cards, and then you have to plant them based on the types of structures you've made. You have to then harvest grapes off your vines. You have to turn those grapes into wine, and then you have to gain the wine orders and turn that wine into wine orders. And so there's all these steps of operations that link into one another that require a lot of forward planning and strategic planning. So, and Viticulture is also still pretty easy to learn because you're kind of learning it just season by season the first year. So I would say that I'd probably give that to Viticulture and then next to maybe Tapestry. JJ says, happy holidays and happy new year. Same to you, JJ. Miles says, Leona this is his daughter. We were talking about this earlier with Wingspan being a kid-friendly game. He says, Wingspan is starting to read, though not enough to read all the cards, but she actually remembers what many of the cards do now, or gets the idea from the symbols and what she can read. That's really great that she can retain that amount, because there are a lot of cards in Wingspan now. James says, what board game publishers do you admire the most? And of words, what do I wish Stonemaier games would be like? That's a good question, James. I think I understand the second question. There are quite a few publishers that I admire quite a bit. I did a blog post last year that consolidates a lot of them onto one post. And I will, it's actually tough for me to link here, but if you search for, this is kind of a weird way to search for it, but search Stonemaier Games Instagram strategies. And on that post, I list a lot of board game companies that are similar in methods and philosophies to Stonemaier Games. And the post is about Instagram, but there are a lot of companies there that I just love and admire. It's a list of between 20 and 25 companies, because I keep adding to that list. And these are companies that I look at, that I admire, that I aspire for Stonemaier Games to be like these companies, and I learn from them all the time. Yeah, if anyone can find that link for James and post in the comments, that would be awesome. Chad says, just joining, wondering if you make notes in rulebooks of the games you play, of things you like or think you might help in future game development. I definitely make mental notes. Sometimes I make notes on sticky pads while I'm playing or learning games. I don't make notes in the rulebooks themselves, though. Carol says that we were talking about the Stormlight Archives, Brandon Sanderson a minute ago, and she says her husband and her were recently discussing the Stormlight Archives before we read the next novel. It had me thinking about how great an IP it would be for a board game where you level up characters and they gain various abilities and experiences. When you read these novels, does it ever trigger the game designer in you? Are you enjoying the new book? I'm definitely enjoying the new book. Yes, novels are a huge inspiration for me for games, game mechanisms, game themes, world themes, and reading Brandon Sanderson's books. Yes, they definitely do trigger the game designer in me. I actually did reach out to his lawyer years ago, or his agent years ago, about the rights for the Reckoners, and at the time they weren't available. And then it turned out that another company got those rights and did a great job with the game. So I'm very happy that I'm blanking on the name of the company now, but the Reckoners has a wonderful tabletop implementation. The big thing about IP is, I have a recent video about IP games, and the big thing about them is that you need to spend a lot of time in that world, in that IP, rereading the books, really getting to know them, to I think do a good job with the tabletop implementation. And so it takes, I think, the right series for me to want to do that, because it's very rare that I actually reread books, because there are so many other books that I want to read that I haven't read yet. JJ says, we just finished Charterstone's campaign. Any recommendations of our next legacy style game? I'm actually doing a new top 10 list about legacy games soon, because my previous list is a bit old. We just finished Pandemic Legacy Season 0 and had a great time with it if you're looking for a cooperative experience. I think near the top of the list will have to be Clank Legacy. We really enjoyed Clank Legacy. But if you enjoyed the village building style of Charterstone, I'd highly recommend The Rise of Queensdale. That's a fantastic legacy game that is also about village building. There's also My City, which I haven't played, that's much newer. I haven't played that yet, so I can't vouch for it, but it does look pretty cool. That's kind of a polyomino legacy game. Tim says, he says, I think it was in the rules of Tapestry where you said if the turn for the previous player doesn't affect you, then you can go ahead and start yours. I kind of say this on the side of the rulebook too. I do that when I play with people as well. He says, with Everdell, a different game, Everdell, same actually, Argos says Tapestry. With Everdell, I seem to have bad AP, analysis paralysis. It angered the other players. I don't know what was so different from that game than the others for me. Any tips on Everdell? AP is tough, yeah. When you have analysis paralysis, it does impact everyone at the table when that happens. It's been a while since I played Everdell. I don't have it. I'm kind of hoping for a digital version to come out so I can play it digitally. But it's been too long for me to play it to give tips on Everdell. Yeah, sorry about that. Joshua says, I know that you don't usually play Automa. That's kind of the solo modes in our games. And I also know that the co-op Automa module in Oceania isn't billed as full co-op game, but do you think you'll try playing the Automorazi sometime? I probably should. Yeah, I mean, I've heard great things about that campaign. Or the co-op model, not the campaign, but the co-op model. The Tapestry expansion has the campaign in the solo mode. But we should try the co-op mode sometime so I can see how that plays. I found that I tend to really enjoy playing cooperative games with Megan. Chad says, when you look back at the young, scrappy Jamie who just started a board game company with his buddy, what goals have succeeded and what goals have you changed or dropped? Back then we were just focused on one game. We were just like, let's. I was focused on viticulture. Alan came on board a few months into the design of viticulture, and we were just focused on trying to make that game come to life and seeing what would happen with it. We didn't even know if it would be a company beyond that, if it would be more than one game beyond that. So we were kind of just taking it one step at a time. And I would say the one early thing is I was kind of this. I talk about this in my book too. I was focused a little bit too much early on my dream to publish a board game. And very quickly, especially after I launched the Kickstarter project, I realized that this isn't about me. This isn't about my dream. And also probably other people don't really care about my dream, and that's okay, other than friends and family. What became immediately important to me was making something awesome for other people. I wanted something for other people, for you to enjoy, and to make it about you, not about me. And so that has been a huge, very early on was a huge shift in philosophy that was really important for me to discover. And I've tried to stick with that ever since, even as the company has grown. That this isn't about me. I'm making things for you. I'm making things for you to have fun with, for you to enjoy, to bring you closer together with the people around you, or with solo play, to give you clever moments to feel clever and have fun. My focus is on you, not on me. And that has been maybe a huge thing. That's a philosophical, not a goal exactly, but a philosophical thing that I've tried to focus on over the years. Yeah. Actually, speaking of my book, Gara says, I just wanted to say I picked up your crowdfunding book yesterday on Kindle, and he's really enjoying it. Thank you so much for checking out that book. My book is called A Crowdfunder's Strategy Guide. And while it does talk about crowdfunding, it's basically all about starting something, starting a business and figuring out what's important to you as you do that and how to be successful in doing it. Danielle says, do I have any plans to come up with a top 10 list of games designed by women? I actually have one. Yeah, it posted a few weeks ago, Danielle. So if you go to my YouTube channel, maybe someone can find it for you. Go to my YouTube channel and you will see it there. Yeah, so I did do it a few weeks ago. I love when someone asks a question about that because I can say I've already done it. Although it is fun to get ideas about things to do in the future as well. But that one in particular I have done very recently, and I hope you enjoyed the video. JJ says, we want to play Scythe, but it has so many expansions and add-ons that we don't know where to start. Any advice? Yeah, just start with the core game. The core game will give you many, many hours of play just in the core game without adding anything onto it. And you can kind of see as you play, okay, maybe I want more factions. Maybe I want metal coins. Maybe I want a bigger board. You can kind of see what you want after you play the core game. But definitely just start with the core game for a while. That's all you need for a long time, really. Chad says, have you played High Frontier? What are your thoughts on hyper-realistic simulation-type games? I haven't played High Frontier. In terms of simulation games, sometimes I like them. The one thing that I see in some simulation games that can be a mistake is where the designers put the simulation ahead of the fun, and I think that's kind of that's hard to do, and maybe a somewhat of a common mistake when your focus is more on realism and the simulation rather than the player experience. So. I don't know anything about High Frontier, but hopefully the designer was able to walk that line and have that balance and focus on the fun. Oh, and Joshua was very quick with the video, my top 10 tabletop games designed by women. Thank you, Joshua. The one game missing from this list that I should say that I didn't think of is Tussie Mussy by Elizabeth Hargrave. I said at the very beginning of the video that I wasn't going to count Wingspan for the video because I don't include Stonemaier games on these top 10 lists, even though I would have if it wasn't a Stonemaier game. But by doing so, I kind of took Elizabeth out of the running for the list, which was a huge mistake because Elizabeth has designed wonderful games for other companies as well. And I love Tussie Mussy. Tussie Mussy definitely would have been on that list. Let's see. I'm coming to the end here, so I'm going to skim through a little bit. If I missed your question, I apologize. I'm not trying to do that. Oh, here was a question right here. Nee says he started Charterstone for the first time last night with a friend. Super enjoying the digital campaign. There's a great digital implementation from Acram Digital, and it works well with social distancing. How involved are you with digital adaptations of your content? Not very. A lot of people often have questions for me about the digital game, and I know very little. My approach for digital games has been that I trust the developers to do a great job with it, and if I hear otherwise from fans, then I talk to those developers and I make sure that they do a better job, and maybe I don't work with them again in the future. We do have an internal process where we do review digital implementations before they're approved, but it's not a constant process. It's something that pretty much happens once when the game is in alpha, once when it's in beta, and once right around the time that it's released. But for the most part, we trust these companies to do a good job with it. We try to pick good digital developers to do a good job with our games. So if you're having fun with Charterstone Digital, all credit goes to Acram Digital, not to Stonemaier Games. Although Joe does help out with that. Part of Joe's job is to review the digital games. Sean says, who's my favorite character in My Little Scythe? He says his son and I love the character descriptions. He loves to pick who each person uses. My favorite are Biddy and Walter, because Biddy and Walter are my cats, and they do make an appearance in the game. I believe they are the red characters, because I usually play red when I play games. Cody says, from what I remember, you prefer fiction over nonfiction reading. Do you read nonfiction literature? What business, entrepreneurship literature have you enjoyed? I do, yeah. So this has been kind of a struggle with me for a few years now. Most of the nonfiction that I read are blogs. For a while, I was really enjoying business magazines and business books, but I found that I never really make time for them. And the main time I make time to read is right before I go to bed. And if I read a business-related or entrepreneurial-related book right before I go to bed, it turns on my brain instead of turning off my brain. Fiction turns off my brain, lets me relax, lets me go to sleep. But so I do have some books that I really enjoyed. I enjoyed Drive by Daniel Pink. I enjoyed, there's a great book by the 37 Signals guys that I'm blanking on. Let's see. I'll Google 37 Signals book. has a very catchy remote. Oh no, Rework. Rework is a fantastic book, and that's one that is very easy to read in little doses. But really, and there's some great board game design books on like from the Board Game Design Lab. There's a great book from them. There's a great book from Joe Slack about board game design. But there are more on my shelf that I want to read that I haven't read yet because I don't have like a specific time in my day to make that happen. But I'm always open to recommendations. There are a lot on my list that I need to check out, both on my Kindle list and on my actual physical shelf. Patrick says, do I have a 10 by 10 list for 2021? No, I love that people have fun with the 10 by 10 list. If you don't know what that is, that means that you say, okay, these are 10 games that I want to play at least 10 times in 2021. You're essentially committing to going deep in a certain number of games. But no, I don't. I kind of just go with the flow in terms of what I play rather than make lists like that. But I do understand the point of them, and I like that some people want to choose certain games to definitely go deep on. Carl says, thank you for the gift that is Charterstone. Thank you. He says, amazing twists and surprises, had a great two-player campaign. About two-player experiences, due to the number of cards in the Wingspan base game, do you recommend using only the expansion cards when playing European or the Oceania expansions? The way I play is I shuffle all the cards together and I just choose a random deck of them, of those shuffled cards, and I play with that deck. We are starting to recommend in the rule books that it might be a little bit easier if you choose two sets, like the core game and one expansion, or both expansions, and just shuffle those cards together and play with them. But you really can play with all the cards. If you don't mind a little extra shuffling, you can play with all the cards. And that's my preferred style of play, but I am also a slightly chaotic player. I don't care so much if like that say like an end of round birds say they rarely show up in one game because they're shuffled somewhere else into the deck. I'm okay with that. But if you really love like a certain type of bird power in the game, like the end of game powers in Oceania or the end of round powers in European, you might want to isolate them a little bit. Isolate those cards. You could even pick out those specific cards and make sure they're in the deck. So there's a lot of flexibility here as to how you could set up your deck if you wanted to. Yeah. One way that I've heard that some two-player games are played by some people is that they shuffle together all the cards, they choose one of those decks, they play with that deck, and they put those cards aside. So the next time they play, they know they're going to see birds they didn't see in that first play. Edgar says, have I played Lost Ruins of Arnak yet, and what did I think of it? It is one of the games of the year for me. I'm glad to hear that, Edgar. I'm super excited to play it for the first time tomorrow. So I haven't played it yet. I'm doing that before I make my top 10 list of 2020, just in case it does make that list. Sean says, have I read the Murderbot series? They're great reads that you might enjoy. There are 4 short books. I haven't read that, but I appreciate the recommendation. I'll check that out. I'll make a note of the Murderbot series. I'll make a mental note on this one because I'm almost done with the podcast today. Carol says, if I played Argent the Consortium, I got it from my Secret Santa and still need to learn it. I did play it once at a convention years ago, and I thought it had some really clever end game goals where you don't know, I believe I'm remembering this correctly, like you don't know what you will score at the end of the game unless you go out of your way to learn what you're going to score at the end of the game. It's been a while since I played it, but I do remember something being really clever in those regards. Donna says, if we are teaching a game that has complicated setup, we try to set up much of the game ahead of time so they aren't overwhelmed. This goes back to the question about how to onboard new players into a game and the idea of if they are sitting through like a 20-minute setup, I can see them checking out for a little bit. So if you set up in advance, you can help that onboarding process. Again, I'm going to skim through a little bit here. Let's see. David says, how many games do you own? I own probably around 150 games. I try to keep it closer to around 100 if I can. Derek says, when do you expect the new printing of the Spiral-Bound Scythe rulebook to be available? I heard a rumor that it might have arrived at our fulfillment center yesterday, or one of our warehouses yesterday. I don't know if that's actually the case, but we're going to look into that to see if we actually have it. But the top priority for us when we get those is to send it to anyone who received the first printing, who requested the revised version, because there were some mistakes in the first printing. So we're going to first send it out to those people, and then we'll have some extra to sell. But we're not going to start selling them until we've shipped out all those that we need to people who bought them in the first batch. Chad says, have I read Dark Matter? I haven't read it yet. No, that is on my list, though. I've heard great things about it. Let's see. Levin says, congrats on making Scythe the #1 board game in the Philippines. Wow, that's awesome. I didn't know about that. Thanks for sharing that. Edgar says, were the new boards in Wingspan inspired by the modular boards in Scythe? Can we see it in expansions for other games like Tapestry or Viticulture? I don't know. I think it was just something that Elizabeth wanted to try out, a new format for the boards, something a little new. It was tied into Nectar a little bit. Can we see that in other expansions? New boards. Well, I mean, Tapestry has the different player mats. No, I don't. I don't think we're gonna do new income mats in Tapestry. But like asymmetric player mats or asymmetric player mats in Wings in Viticulture. We don't have anything like that planned, but I appreciate the idea and that we might consider it in the future. Let's see, just scrolling down a little bit here. Thank you to Joshua for posting links today. Um, I'll just look for any last few questions. Daniel says, "Have you been playing any video games? If so, any you recommend?" I don't really play any video games. I think the only one that I got into in the last year was Slay the Spire, and I really enjoyed that. I have a video about Slay the Spire if you want to check that out. But Slay the Spire is essentially a tabletop game. It's a deck building game in digital form. If I do play video games, they're typically board game ports. Yeah. Let's see. Almost down the list here. Just looking for any last few questions. Dort says, "Is the position of the chair in the background with just a bit of light because the curtain because of the cat?" Yes, that is back there is Biddy's chair. Biddy sits the most often there. He does like to peek out the window, and I keep the window mostly closed when I'm on video because the light impacts the camera and the camera's focus and all that stuff. But yeah, that is Biddy's chair. There's not a chair for humans. Benjamin says, "At what point were you able to grow your company to the point where you could support your family comfortably? How many games published, years, etc." Benjamin, that's a great question to ask, I think, if you're starting a business. One fortunate thing I've had throughout most of the years of my company is that I've been single. So I haven't had to support anyone but myself and my cats. But basically, I ran a Kickstarter campaign for viticulture. It did okay, but all the money went to making viticulture and to shipping viticulture. I then ran a campaign for Euphoria, which did a lot better. It was a much bigger campaign, and after Euphoria, I was basically working two full-time jobs, and so I asked my boss at my full-time job if I could take one day off a week and get paid 20% less and work that day solely on my company. And so I started doing that. I did that for another like around 6 months. And then at that point, we had actually delivered Euphoria. We had localization partners for it. We were reprinting viticulture. We had kind of ongoing revenue, and we had built up enough profit at that point that I looked ahead at the next year and I said, okay, if everything goes really poorly, I have basically a year of cushion here, of both savings and income from the company, mostly savings, that I can just do this for a year and see if it works. And so that's when I gave it a try. I have some blog posts about this if you want to check them out on the Samara Games blog. But those are some of the things I looked at. They weren't metrics like how many games published, necessarily how many years. It was really looking at the money, the cushion I had, and the partnerships and projections I had based on those partnerships with distributors and localization partners, reprints, another Kickstarter that was coming up after that for Tuscany, things like that. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. We went a little long today, but that's fine. I wasn't here last week. Thank you so much for joining me for this chat. I hope you have a happy new year, a safe new year, and I will see you in 2021 with some fun stuff. Take care. Bye.